From pick-me women to Tradwife, here is how women are getting radicalized and red-pilled in real time. Honestly, listen up because the alt-right pipeline is so insane. I feel like every week that goes by, I become more aware of it and aware of how much more pervasive it is. And I think as a society, we really need to look around and understand the way that these social media companies and media, yada, 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 is really, really like brainwashing people. The state of things are not good, my friend. We are in a really precarious place. And if we don't like wake the F up and see the way that certain subcultures of the internet are radicalizing people to like the alt-right, girl, you in danger, girl. This episode, I really want to explore how women have lost the plot and, more importantly, how the patriarchy is recruiting us against ourselves. Now, we see so many women in troves just voting against their best interests, turning their backs on their communities, their neighborhoods, their families, their children, and voting for things that put themselves and their children and their neighbors in harm's way. And them feeling empowered to doing so and them feeling like it's a good idea, like no one's forcing their hand, you know? That is the propaganda. Yes, ma'am. And I think when we examine some of this information, it's really just easy to see the holes in their story. Like, explain to me how we have a movement called Make America Healthy Again. And that same group who wants to make America healthy is like cheering on Trump while he guts free school lunches, childcare programs, healthcare programs. Like, that's not going to make anybody healthier. That's not good for anybody. Like, let's be so for real. Somewhere along the lines, we've really lost the plot and we need to like name that, be aware of it. Call your other female, women, friends, girls, family members, whoever in. And yeah, let's really be aware. I feel like a lot of my episodes, I'm like, here's the patriarchy and here's men upholding it. And this is why this is bad. But a lot of my episodes really are about dismantling our inner misogyny. And I hope we've done enough of that throughout this season of this podcast to be able to, you know, take it one step further and take it from dismantling our inner misogyny to like dismantling the misogyny around us. And that means calling in or sometimes calling out certain friends and certain loved ones. There's a special place in hell for women who don't support other women. And I think we got to start reminding certain people of that. From tradwives on TikTok to Maha moms to anti-abortion organizers, it's giving pick me energy, but make it fascist. So enough's enough, guys. Today, we're going to break down how women are getting pulled into these alt-right red pill pipelines, what they're actually cheering for, and how it's not good for women or children. And most importantly, how we can start to deprogram this mess. And in case you're new here, one fact we all know is that the patriarchy has always needed women to thrive. It's always needed women to uphold the patriarchy so that it continue to be a system. Let's be aware of that. Let's be aware how long the patriarchy has been like the dominant structure leading society and how long it has turned women against themselves. And we're not seeing anything new today. We're just seeing more of the same tools the patriarchy has been using for centuries. If you're fighting feminism, you're fighting yourself. And stop fighting yourself. Here's how. Okay, why are women useful as the patriarchy's messengers? Why are they targeted? Why are we even here in the first place? Let's look back at some history to help us collect some data points that can really guide us on understanding this. Because as I said, this playbook is not new. In the 1970s, Phyllis Schlafly mobilized housewives against the Equal Rights Amendment, which still hasn't been ratified to this day, a bajillion years later. She built a whole career telling women that equality would destroy their marriages and make them have to be drafted for wars and yada, 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 yada. And you heard me. She built her whole career telling women that they shouldn't work, but she built a whole career off of that. Okay? We following that hypocrisy already? It's giving pick me. And in the 80s and 90s, we saw that whether it was the war on drugs or so many other things just blown out of proportion by the media, there was this rhetoric linking sort of like being a good mom to being conservative, which has really laid a lot of the groundwork that we see today of selling like this family values narrative and using it as like a political weapon. We'll get more into that later. Fast forward to today, women are the faces of book bans and anti-abortion protests. This like concerned parent movement, predominantly made up of moms, is taking away history from our education system. It's taking away healthcare from women. It's criminalizing kids for having gender dysphoria, for feeling like they're not the gender that they were born in, for having a crush on someone who is the same gender as you. Like, that's like, take a breath, moms, take a breath, get offline, go touch grass. Like, you're doing what now? And again, like, doing it all while feeling like this is what's best for themselves and their kids. And that's the part I really want to focus on. Because like, how did we get to a place where these things that are like clearly not good for children are being touted as like the best thing in the world for children? I mean, you know how I feel about gun regulation. Like, that is a perfect example of this. Like, the same women who are terrified of their children being read a book by a drag queen for Drag Queen Story Hour or whatever are the same moms who are like, don't change any of the gun laws. In fact, it's okay that Trump has rolled back gun laws because that's fine and that's whatever. Like, drag queens aren't hurting your kids the same way that white boys and white men predominantly are going into schools and taking kids out. I don't understand how you've been convinced to let that be normalized. But the idea of like a drag queen being in your neighborhood feels like a personal attack to you. Because by the way, if you don't want your kid to go to Drag Queen Story Hour, like, no one's forcing them to. You can totally just like not go. But it's a lot harder to just not go to school because school is important. How did we get here? You know, I hope whoever's watching this has watched my episode on the fairness doctrine being repealed, because I really do feel like all roads go back to that. So if you haven't seen that episode, go watch it, because I really feel like for us to be able to move forward in any way that is like somewhat in touch with reality and sanity, we need to have some semblance of fair and unbiased news. Like, we're at this place now, the internet's gone too far. We're always going to have opinions or influencers on TikTok, YouTube, whatever, like saying their unbiased thing. Like, I don't think there's any rolling that back. But if we can't even trust our news to give us the truth, like, it's just the barometer for transparency is so low to the point where people are literally being like radicalized and brainwashed just like that, because they have been getting this misinformation planted in them. So then when they go on YouTube and they watch a few like radical things, they're actually like, oh, okay, this is kind of in line with all these other things I heard growing up. So how does the alt-right pipeline hook women in? The alt-right is very anti-women. It is very patriarchal, white supremacy, like violence, mama. So how are so many women getting sucked in there? Because you would feel like it's not a place for women to be, but they're there. They're there, and we don't like to see it. The alt-right pipeline targets women, and especially moms, like natural concern around keeping themselves and their families safe, and the natural fear of like, I need to protect my children. Women are told they're protecting their kids from crime, immigrants, woke ideology. Fear gets them in the door saying like, hey, you want your kid to be safe? Do this. 9 times out of 10, if you tell someone this will keep your kid safe, like, they will think, probably 10 times out of 10, they'll at least consider doing it, because who wouldn't want to keep their kids safe? Herein lies the problem, where we're told that you need to be anti-immigrant to keep your kids safe, but we're not talking to parents about how groypers are in the internet, like telling them to write a manifesto and go shoot up a school. You know? So we're really capitalizing on the fear and having them look here at this thing that actually isn't hurting their kids. And then they're simultaneously ignoring this thing that is actually really bad for kids. The alt-right pipeline hooks women in with using motherhood as identity. Red pill content ideas define women as mothers. So your worth is about raising children, bringing children into this world. And if that's what your worth is, you become a lot more hyper fixated on making sure you're doing it the best way possible, which, you know, again, fair enough. Everyone wants to be a good mom. Love that for you. But they're taking that as your identity and using it against you and turning it on yourself, where now you are like hyper vigilant about threats that don't exist versus things you actually need to worry about. With the motherhood aspect, I think it's important that we acknowledge how isolating motherhood is in the culture of the United States. Like if you go to Europe, you see kids in like every restaurant. Here in the US, people are like, leave your kids at home. You know, we don't center women and children. Childcare costs more than rent in most states. There are childcare deserts. Like we have the highest maternal mortality rate. Like we don't prioritize mothers and children, and mothers don't get help. Children don't get help as much as in most other cultures. So motherhood in the US is very isolating on its own in that way. So think about if you're a mom and you're isolated, and if you're not working, but even if you are, but like especially if you're not, it would be easy to be enticed by like community and belonging. And I think that's one thing that the alt-right, the red pill pipeline really does to hook women in, to get their claws into women. Think about it, like Maha groups, church circles, Tradwife influencers, they create this safe space where women feel validated, they feel community, they feel belonging, which is something the patriarchy like inherently pulls away from women, leaving them, you know, really lonely, in need of community. Women are being sucked down the alt-right pipeline because we've made respectability politics a focal point in our culture. You're a good woman if you play by the rules, that sort of thing. We've been taught from cradle to the grave to not be loud, not take up space, not shake the boat. So if you've been indoctrinated in this way your whole life, like it doesn't seem like that much of a stretch to like sort of go down this pipeline from regular conservative to alt-right and these ideologies. You know, you're just sort of been told to just go along with whatever's happening around you. And there's a lot of far right stuff happening around us that's been normalized that shouldn't be. And I think it's important that we see how women sell the patriarchy back to other women. Conservative women are often the most effective messengers of patriarchal values because they find a way to package submission as empowerment. Whether it's Tradwife influencers on TikTok glamorizing the 1950s housewives, or political figures arguing that women don't need equal rights, these voices normalize regression by making it look like a choice and making that choice look like empowerment. It's especially harmful because when women deliver these talking points, you know, saying like abortion is murder or feminism is destroying families, it shields male politicians. It gives them legitimacy. They get to point and say like, see, women agree with us. And it also makes it easier to convince other women to think that way. I think the easiest modern example to turn to is the Tradwife movement. The Tradwife trend online really romanticizes the idea of being fully financially dependent on your husband, often while ignoring how dangerous that setup could be for women who don't have nice husbands. The Tradwife aesthetic also glamorizes returning to the 1950s, both in like gender roles and aesthetics. And in a moment where we have an oppressive president who's been saying, make America great again. And then we have this whole slew of women being like, yeah, take us back to the 1950s. Like, that's not on accident that we're getting multiple narratives fed to us constantly about how back then was better. But when you look at back then, like we didn't have as many civil or human rights as we do today as a collective. So really think about what you're promoting and what you're watching. And I'm not saying you can't watch like homegirl make her sourdough. I love watching videos of people cooking things. I love watching videos of people cleaning things. Like it's just fun for me. I'm not saying you can't enjoy that. What I am saying is like, just be careful of the subliminal or not so subliminal messaging you're getting from multiple sources. I think my biggest issue with the Tradwife movement is it really does rebrand unpaid domestic labor as empowerment. And we've seen it with influencers like Hannah Nealman, the ballerina farmer girl. They have these huge platforms that normalize submission as aspirational. It normalizes giving up your dreams to raise a family. It normalizes moving from a big city to a ranch to be more traditional, and to each their own. I never want to yuck anybody's yum. I'm not saying everybody has to be like a hard career working woman in the city, do what you want. What I am saying is be careful of people who are selling you submission as empowerment. And intentionally or not, these Tradwives are building a pipeline where young women equate their value with serving men. They make patriarchal control look cozy, not coercive. But we also see this with conservative commentators, notably Candace Owens, who frequently argues that feminism has failed women. Yeah, I talk a lot about ways that we can improve feminism, but trying to just write it off as something we no longer need at all and making money off that is crazy. These women being yeah, guys, subscribe to my channel and pay me and let me tell you about why you should not have a career of your own. It's insane to me. And we also see it with Republican women in Congress who have voted to restrict abortion access while simultaneously blocking policies like paid maternity leave or childcare subsidies. You can't tell me you're pro-life and then not be pro-child. It's weird. Also, can we talk about that conservative lawmaker in Florida who voted against abortion rights and then had an ectopic pregnancy and needed an abortion and had to go, I think it was to the governor, Ron DeSantis, for approval. And everyone was like, guys, this abortion doesn't count though. That abortion is healthcare, mama. Abortion is healthcare, baby. And you just proved that. You don't get to pick and choose when abortion is healthcare and when it's not. It's the patriarchy's favorite trick. Outsource its PR to women. If a man says stay home and make babies, it's misogynistic. But if a woman in a cute floral apron says it, suddenly it's aspirational aesthetic content. And it works because it appeals to fear. It targets so many different fears that women have. The fear of loneliness, the fear of instability, the fear of being too much. By selling submission as safety and tradition as empowerment, conservative women become the Trojan horse of the patriarchy. And take a second to look at how many conservative women are flourishing right now. Most of the Mormon wives from Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, which I love that show, most of them are MAGA. And they're on Dancing with the Stars and they're all over our For You pages. And one of them just became the Bachelorette. Conservative women are being propped up, not only by our timelines and our For You pages, but by media institutions. They're really having their moment to shine and being highlighted. And I think it's really important that we note that. I'm not saying don't watch The Bachelor. I probably will watch it, or The Bachelorette, I guess, because I like that show and I like reality TV, and I'm probably not going to stop watching it, but I'm going to be really aware that, these parasocial relationships I'm forming with certain women on certain reality TV shows, those are not my friends. Those are not girls. You can't be voting for people who are stripping away women's choices, women's rights, women's privacy, women's healthcare, and be a girl's girl. You can't. So yeah, just because they're entertaining to watch, they're not your friends. Women are not immune to patriarchal conditioning. In fact, women are often some of its fiercest defenders because systems of power recruit the oppressed to enforce its rules. It's a tale as old as time. Look no further than the women leading the crusades against abortion access, calling themselves MAHA, Make America Healthy Again. These aren't rebellions. They're women carrying water for the patriarchy. They're doing the patriarchy's work. Right now, it really seems to me like modern conservative women are leading the way for the patriarchy. We see it with Moms of Liberty pushing book bans, with female politicians like Marjorie Taylor Greene or Kristi Noem, who are selling authoritarianism with this relatable mom vibe, which they're not relatable. I just want to be a good wife and mom and support Donald Trump. And again, the influencers are online who are glamorizing submissive Tradwife roles, all while raking in that ad revenue. It's so frustrating to see politicians weaponizing femininity, especially when it's female politicians, as Marjorie Taylor Greene, Carrie Lake, Kristi Noem. These far-right politicians present regressive policies like abortion bans, cutting childcare, attacking trans youth as family values, which is done intentionally because it softens the cruelty, which makes it feel like a protective maternal act rather than what it is, which is authoritarianism, which is rolling back human rights. We've seen Marjorie Taylor Greene say that women should embrace traditional family roles while pushing for nationwide abortion bans. Women packaging patriarchal values as family values is a recruitment strategy. It convinces women that control means safety, that submission means empowerment, and that couldn't be further from the truth. Phyllis Schlafly did the same thing in the 70s, and we still see it today. It's, again, tale as old as time. Like most oppressive power structures, the patriarchy thrives on the idea of scarcity, convincing women that there are limited spots for respectability, safety, and even love. That's intentional because it tells you that if you want one of those spots, you better be a good girl. You'd better play by the patriarchy's rules. And that's how we end up with so many pick-me's. Internalized misogyny is like a survival tactic. It's a self-defense mechanism. If the system punishes women, siding with the punisher may feel safer than resisting. Again, all very intentional. And we've seen it in many recent elections. Peer research shows that women, especially white evangelical Christian women, make up a critical voting bloc that support policies that are directly harmful to them. I have to imagine that for them, it's because identity and belonging feel safer to them than freedom does. Policies that strip away reproductive rights, criminalize miscarriages, and gut public education aren't just pushed forward and carried forward by men. They're enabled by women. These women are pushing this message to themselves and to other women. These narratives slow down feminist progress, if not like totally erase it, as we've seen with the fall of Roe. They divide women against each other, but probably worst of all, they give cover for authoritarian policies. So how do we reach these women? I feel like this divide just grows further and further every year. And it's like seemingly impossible to want to surround yourself with people who, you know, are supporting things that are making it not as safe for you to exist in this country. So especially if you are a white woman, I'm especially talking to you, but this can go for all people listening. Use your privilege. That's why I'm saying, especially if you're a white woman, use your privilege, but you know, if not, use your relatability, use whatever. Like, we really need to be having meaningful conversations with the women in our lives about some of this shit. Because, you in danger, girl. Okay, so if you are going to talk to someone who is, you know, gone down the pipeline, lead with empathy. Again, fear is what pushes people down the alt-right pipeline. They're scared, they're lonely, or they're looking for certainty in a chaotic world. So coming in with judgment isn't going to help people. They need empathy. I think if you can establish some sort of conversation, it's important to show them other alternatives. Show what real safety, what real community, what real care look like. It's especially powerful if you can do this in feminist spaces, opposed to like conservative spaces like the church. I think it's important that we all remind each other that the patriarchy doesn't protect women, it exploits them. The maternal mortality rate in states with abortion bans proves this. Because when you really look at what these moms, what these women are pushing forward, it's quite shocking to see the harm that they're cheering for. I mean, we've seen how these anti-abortion laws are playing out. They are not protecting life. They are criminalizing women's health. And we've seen multiple women die because of these bans. We've also seen maternal mortality rates surge since these bans have been introduced, especially in really restrictive states like Texas. Studies show that Texas has one of the highest maternal mortality rates in all of the developed world. But Fox News isn't going to tell conservative women that. So you have to. And we've seen multiple women be jailed for miscarriages under fetal personhood laws, which are disproportionately targeting women of color. That's another thing that when I talk about women being jailed for miscarriages, I get so many comments on my TikTok page being like, that's not real, that's not true. And I'm like, it is. Google is free. I'm not here lying. This is a real thing that's happening. And people just think I'm talking shit because they can't believe that our government would do that. But like, yeah, that's what you guys are supporting. So either have a strong opinion and be informed, or maybe don't have such a strong opinion, because that's real. Just imagine grieving a loss and then being treated like a criminal. That's not pro-life, babe. That's state violence. A good example of this is also cuts to social supports. Project 2025, which is the Heritage Foundation's playbook for Trump's second term, is all about slashing programs like WIC, SNAP, and childcare subsidies. And we've seen this really successfully happen in the months that Trump has been president. I know it feels like it's been 10 years, but it hasn't. It hasn't even been a year. These social supports that are being gutted are lifelines overwhelmingly accessed by women and children. Nearly 6.6 million mothers rely on WIC for nutrition. Cutting it doesn't just hurt families, it worsens poverty cycles for generations, which isn't just bad for the individuals, it's bad for the collective. Republicans are branding this as cutting waste, but they're literally taking milk out of babies' mouths while handing tax breaks to billionaires. It's offensive. Like, you should be offended that they think you're so dumb you won't notice this. They're calling it small government, but what they really are doing is shrinking family support until families collapse, and then blaming moms for not working harder or being better moms, which is already a narrative we see way too often. These conservative, MAGA, red-pilled, alt-right women often are huge fans of ICE and their state-sanctioned violence. Immigration enforcement is another arm of this cruelty machine. ICE and CBP have a combined budget of $24 billion with a B dollars. That's more than the FBI and the DEA combined. That's not security, that's militarization. And what do we get for that money? Detention centers like Alligator Alcatraz, also known as Alligator Auschwitz, deaths from medical neglect, and raids that are ripping families apart. Republicans don't want you to connect the dots. Their policies are jailing kids, whether they're immigrants or US citizens. That's not about safety. That's clearly about control. They don't want safe communities. They want surveillance communities. Because once you normalize cages for immigrants, it's a short hop, skip, and a jump away for everyone else. I think my biggest gripe with conservative moms is the way they blindly support the NRA and the way they can't see through the Republican and NRA's manufactured fear. The same politicians screaming about the need to protect children from drag queens or Black history are being bankrolled by an industry that makes it easier for an 18-year-old to get an AR-15 than to rent a car. Firearms are now the leading cause of death for children and teens in the United States of America. But instead of regulating guns, Republicans deflect by regulating wombs, immigrants, youth. They don't care about kids. They care about keeping their donors happy, which I can understand when politicians do that. But why are you as a constituent okay with that? I feel like people on the far right have been convinced that they need to be terrified of immigrants and empowered women and queer people. But it's overwhelmingly white, straight men and boys who are doing these mass shootings. And they seemingly get like a free pass. We saw it with the shooter that was trans. It's like been painted across the news, like this one person who was trans and did this violent thing is like a representation for all trans people. And this is why you have to be wary and trans this and trans that. But whenever it's a white man doing it, a white cis straight man doing it, it's just like, oh yeah, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And they don't make it about white men. They don't make it about that demographic, and they just slide it under the rug. We should be calling a lot of this stuff domestic terrorism, but we don't, because it's white men doing it. And because we don't take it seriously when white men do it, they continue to do it, and they continue to inspire other people that look like them to do it. And now we have an epidemic where firearms are the number one thing killing teens and children in the United States. Why in the world are we not taking that seriously? It baffles me that you are up in arms about drag queens reading books to kids, but this doesn't faze you. Like, let's connect the dots, okay? Abortion bans, cuts to social programs, ICE raids, gun lobby protection. Individually, these sound like separate issues, but together they are a strategy. When you strip away bodily autonomy, when you shrink social supports, when you militarize punishment, the patriarchy doesn't need you to agree. It just needs you to be too tired to fight back. So why are so many smart women falling for this? Compliance gets rewards. As I said, Tradwives, Maha moms, MAGA moms, conservative women, they get platforms and they get attention. They're treated as wholesome, virtuous role models. We see it with, the rise of the Mormon influencer. We see it with Mom Talk and those Mormon wives who are like dominating our screens. And I love them. Honestly, they're so fun to watch, but it's like, just peep what's happening. Again, women have been told from cradle to the grave that if they just follow the rules, they'll be safe, they'll be protected. And I think that's why so many women are easy to sort of manipulate in this way. But of course, it's like the pick-me-ness of it all and the internalized misogyny that really, really allows this to happen. Policing other women, calling them sluts, calling them bad mothers, calling them irresponsible. Maybe that feels like power to someone who is misogynistic themselves. But it's not power. It's just borrowed authority from the patriarchy. Here are 5 steps to deprogram someone or maybe even yourself from red pill content. Step 1. Check the emotional hook. Red pill and authoritarian content always lead with emotion. Fear, rage, shame, or loneliness. If you feel instantly upset or like everyone's out to get you, pause, because that, my friend, is manipulation, also known as fear tactics. Before engaging or sharing the post yourself, ask, am I reacting emotionally or thinking critically? Step 2, ask, who benefits? These pipelines aren't about truth. They are business models. Influencers are monetizing your outrage through your clicks, through merch, through courses, through ad revenue. And politicians use the same playbook. They scare you to secure your votes or your donations. Every time you hear a claim, ask, who benefits from this? Who is profiting off your fear? Step 3, spot the red flags of cult logic. Here are some signs that you're dealing with cult-style manipulation. Us vs them framing. This might look like real men versus weak men, good moms versus selfish women, patriot versus liberals are monsters. I think we've heard a lot of that one lately. Another tactic is claims of secret knowledge. We know the truth. We're going to expose it. They won't tell you it. They want to mind control you. That's like an Uno reverse of mind control and manipulation. Also, look out for isolation tactics. If you disagree with us, you're a traitor. That sort of thing. Back to the us vs them thing really quick. I'd be remiss not to mention the dehumanization of the other side. Comparing immigrants to animals, comparing liberals to monsters. Again, look for the dehumanizing language because it is rampant and it is a red flag. Honestly, write these red flags down somewhere. The more you can name, the more you become aware of it, the more you will be able to notice it and the less power they have over you. Culty content often follows the same formula. It's fear-based headlines. It's us versus them. Them saying liberals want to destroy your family is not an analysis. It's manipulation. Step 4, fact check the contradictions. Authoritarians love hypocrisy. If they're claiming to be pro-family while cutting free lunch and childcare programs, they might not be as pro-family as they say. If they're pushing law and order while voting for a criminal or supporting politicians who allow the NRA to block every gun safety law, they might not care that much about law and order. If they're saying they care about children while ICE puts children in cages, they might not care that much about children. I suggest that you keep a running list of contradictions you see because hypocrisy is often what breaks the spell of people who are caught up in this pipeline. And last but not least, step 5, build or join a better community. Cults and red pill culture thrive on giving lonely people a sense of belonging, and leaving can feel like a void, which is why a lot of people join or never leave, or both. You can replace this with healthier spaces, with feminist content, activist groups, book clubs, sports leagues, support circles. Encourage curiosity, podcasts, documentaries, or even just following accounts that create empathy, care, equity, things like that. Deprogramming isn't about yelling at someone until they disagree with you, although that is tempting sometimes. It's about reminding them that they deserve more than fear and control and manipulation. If the patriarchy wants you tired and scared and alone, the matriarchy wants you fed and free and loved. Which sounds better to you? In conclusion, the patriarchy has always relied on women to sell the lie. And right now, a lot of women are being used as sales reps, whether it's banning books or defending abortion bans or telling you just to be a good mom. Read between the lines, honey. don't fall for it. Because here's the truth. You do not have to play for team patriarchy. You can break the cycle. You can choose solidarity over fear. And you can help build a world where families are actually safe and supported. That is all for today, my friends. Thank you so much for joining this episode of Stay at Home Feminist. Remember that your soft girl era starts here, along with the fall of the patriarchy. Please like, subscribe, share this episode with your favorite feminist baddie or your favorite girl who maybe needs a little reminder to be wary of some of the content we're seeing. I think my new ethos these days, when I've been thinking about what I want to talk about, is like how to balance out all the red pill content we see. So if this episode does even just a little bit of that, my Libra self will be very happy. And it's a Libra season, basically. Anyways, thank you so much for joining, and I will see you next week. Bye.